Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another test-driven JavaScript video. I'm recording this on April 9th, 2013, picking up right where we left off in the last episode. What we're working on here is we are back in our server-side code trying to migrate away from the handwritten file server that we wrote to a proper third-party library. When we originally wrote that code, it was a way for us to get our infrastructure set up. It was a way to teach us about Node. It was also a way to get our first MMF, which was our marketing homepage, up and running quickly and simply while also accomplishing those other goals. But we don't want to write a full-fledged HTTP server ourselves, at least not for serving files. Now, the reason we're working on this now is because our application doesn't load properly. Because with all the new mouse drawing stuff that we have in here, we need it to support multiple files, and our hacky little simple script here only handles one file. So we now need to support multiple files, and we are trying to integrate Node Static to do so. Now, at the end of the last episode, I tried to get that working, and it failed. It was just a disaster. Did not work at all. Had to give up. We're going to try again in this episode. Now, the trick here, when you're migrating from one type of code to another, it's a little different than refactoring. In refactoring, it's all your code and you can take it really incrementally. What we're doing here is kind of like a rewrite, except we aren't writing the new code. We're just replacing our old code with a new code. And that new code has a different API than our old code. So the trick is, how do we get from here to there in an incremental way? That's the real challenge that we're trying to address here. And that's what makes this interesting, is doing this incrementally. We could just, break everything, hack away at it until it worked again. There's not a lot of code here, so that would work. But that's not a good strategy long term. That would work with this little piece of code. It will not work on a real application or a larger application at all. It's useful to know how to do these things incrementally. So how do we do that? Well, I don't know, but we're going to figure it out. Okay. So something I said just now made me think what we want to do, what makes this difficult is that Node Static has a different API. It actually it expects to be used differently than our code here does. So what if we refactor this code to look more like the Node Static API, and then we should be able to substitute Node Static in? I'm thinking that will work. Yeah, let's try that. So the way Node Static works is ultimately what you do is you create the static server with a directory, and then you just serve in response. You just have it handle all requests and responses. That is a little more than I want to try to support right away. I mean, we will get there fairly soon. But fortunately, there's also this serve file call, which allows us to do a single file serve. And we have this function here to serve file, which looks pretty much exactly the same. So I think what I want to do is migrate this code so that it takes the same signature as this code. So we want it to take, let's see, the file path, the status code, these are headers, and the request and response. Okay. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so we've got everything working. Now, let's go ahead and modify this to work in the same way as it is here. So we'll move this to here. Okay, that's good. We need to pass in the status code. That should work just fine because we didn't really change anything. But now what we can do is have response.statuscode be set here. Okay, good. Now headers we don't care about, so I think I'll just leave that one out because we can set that in here. And we want the request, which is easily enough sent through. Okay, that's good. Let's go ahead and check that in. Okay, so what we have here is we've modified serve_file so it matches the file server.serve_file API so that theoretically we could just pop this down in here. That's not quite true though, because the other thing that the server, the node static API needs is it needs the public directory that we're serving out of, and we're not passing that in. So let's modify our server start to take the content directory rather than the home page to serve. Let's see, how would we do that? Well, I think what we could do, let's pull this out as the content directory. Okay, I'm not sure why that's highlighted in this way, but I'm not going to worry about it. That should work. I haven't done anything. Now, down here, where we're starting the server, we can pass in that test content directory. So I'm thinking that if I modify this to take the test content dir, that should lead to some interesting things. In fact, let's modify all cases where we're starting the server to use that new parameter, although in most cases I don't think it's going to matter. Okay, now this should cause our production code to fail. Yeah, error is dir. So basically it's saying here that it's trying to serve the file, but it's a directory. Homepage to serve is no longer homepage to serve, it's content dir. And we don't want to serve the content dir. Here we'll say homepage.html. Problem with that is that that's the wrong name. Let's change it to index.html because that's really what we want to serve. Now this will fail with no such entity because we don't have an index.html because we named it testhome.html. But we'll just change that to index.html. And it's working. Our smoke test failed though, and that's because we haven't modified our production code or our runner, our WeWiki Paint application to do to work in the same way. So it's calling server in the wrong way. So that's actually good. We wanted our smoke test to fail. So we'll just take that out. It will probably still fail. Yes, because this is not named index.html. And done. That was kind of a big step, but I'm going to take it as a win. We did sort of incrementally move this over to use a content directory. There may have been a less invasive way of doing it, maybe adding the content dir parameter first and then taking out the homepage file later, but it worked, so I'm going to check it in. Okay, there we go. We migrated the server to take the content directory rather than the home page. Okay, that's good. Now, I'm hoping that we can have our node static file server use this content dir and serve the file. Let's try that and see what happens. So we're going to create our file server like that and pass in the content dir. So far, so good. Let's go ahead and move serve file. For now, just briefly, we'll move it into our start function so it can have access to that file server variable. Still doing okay, which means that we should be able to say here, file server dot serve file, file status code, no headers, request response. Fingers crossed. No such file, users, blah, 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 we will keep generated test. Okay, so it's trying to serve the file relative to the containing directory. So what we need to do is have this not include the content dir, but just do that. And for the 404 file, we need to do something similar. Really need to have it say something like that. And then when we're writing it, do that. That's a bit clunky. We're going to want to come back and clean this up. But that should work, I'm hoping. Did not work. Oh, I'll bet you the issue here is when we're cleaning up the file. No. Parse here. I'm going to investigate this. Back in a moment. Okay, I'm back. Holy moly. Oh my God. Sorry. It's been a couple of hours since I stopped. And I beat my head against this problem in so many different ways. And this just illustrates so perfectly why I hate third-party code, because it sucks so much. When something goes wrong with it, it is so hard to figure out. I mean, this is a simple little piece of code. I mean, it's 284 lines long, for crying out loud, and it has a nasty bug in it. Specifically, the in-memory cache is not scoped to the object. It is scoped to the module. And what that means is that it uses the same cache all the time. So when we write out a different homepage in this test than we write in our other tests, it reports conflicting data back. This is what happens when you use third-party code, is that the stuff that it's programmed to solve works great. The stuff that it isn't programmed to solve doesn't work, and it's nearly impossible to fix it. I'm going to drop the kick node static out the door and use something else. That is all the time we have for this episode, though, so I will beat my head against a wall because that will feel better than what I've been doing for the last 2 hours. And see you next time. Thanks for watching.